What's up, everybody? Today we're going to be going to a video from a former Muslim and a Christian speaking with Patrick Bet David, who's a great podcast host. And then, so you got the two Christians on your left, two Muslims on your right. They talk about Sharia law, a little bit about the wars that were in the Middle East from America, Muslim religion and Christian religion, talking about the Old Testament, and also using Jesus to kind of spread light onto what Christians actually believe. While a lot of what the Muslims bring is like out of the first 5 chapters of the Old Testament, which is great and everything. We use it to learn, but they're kind of missing the whole point of Jesus and what it means to be a Christian. So it's super interesting video. I appreciate you guys being here, and yeah, let's get right into it.
Robert, your challenge. What is your biggest challenge with the religion of Islam? What's your biggest challenge with it?
You mean the biggest difficulty I see in it?
I would say the biggest difficulty, because to me, I see it from a few different places, right? One, there's faith, meaning none of us have gone to heaven to see what heaven's going to look like. We're all taking a risk. All of us here are taking a risk. Either we're all going to be right, either we're all going to be wrong, or either one of us is going to be right, meaning one group's going to be right and the other's going to be wrong. But we don't know. That's faith, that's prayer. Of course, we've had great experiences in life to say, I had a connection with God. I had a moment with ... And then that's individual to us, right? So to me, it's faith, it's religion, it's enemies, it's common enemies. It's the challenges that's going on in the world, specifically with America as being, for the longest time, the greatest country in the world. What is affecting that? And then there's a few other things that we'll talk about into as well. So, but for me, it's more from the standpoint of, when you've said you've read the Quran dozens of times, you've studied it, you've written about it, you've talked about it. Even I think the government used 2 of your books in 2011 that Wire talked about, right? I don't know what the 2 books were. I think one of them was about Prophet Muhammad, and So your background, you've been in this world. What is your biggest challenge and differences with the religion of Islam?
Well, probably the main thing is the sanctification of violence and the idea that God will bless and even calls upon the believers to commit acts of violence under certain circumstances. Like Rashid here is an ex-Muslim, and so under Islamic law, as it's traditionally and classically formulated, he would be put to death. Muhammad said, anybody who changes his religion, kill him. And it's still the position of all of the schools of Islamic jurisprudence, Sunni and Shia, that the apostate should be put to death. Now, obviously, this is not something that means that every apostate has to always go around watching himself, because you have to have somebody who's willing to do that. But those who do it, they think, well, now I have done something that Allah has commanded, and He will bless me for doing it. And me, myself, because I was standing up for the freedom of speech, 2015, Pamela Geller and I put on in Texas a Muhammad art exhibit and cartoon contest. And it was actually, we featured a lot of classic Shiite Persian art depicting Muhammad, as well as contemporary art that was from a more critical standpoint. And a couple of jihadis came from Phoenix, key members, actually, of the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix. One of them was featured in a recruitment video for them, and they tried to kill us. And so I actually would be also under a death sentence just for drawing Muhammad and for sponsoring people who do, which I did not in order to cause gratuitous insult, but to defend the freedom of speech and freedom of expression, which is the foundation of any genuinely free society.
Daniel, what would you say to that? What's your response to that?
Yeah, so just a few points here. Number one, it's interesting how we want to talk about Islam as a religion, but the religion is 95%, like what Jake mentioned. It's about worshiping God, being devoted to a righteous way of life, loving your neighbors, taking care of your parents. That's what 95% of Islam is about. Yes, there are criminal punishments, which we're going to discuss. There is conquest, there is war theory, there's all of this in Islam. But it's interesting how when a conversation is about Islam, we focus on that 5% instead of the 95% of what Islam is about. We don't see this kind of double standard with like Christians. So if you have someone like Matt Walsh is a traditional Christian. There's slavery in the Bible. There's punishment for blasphemers in the Bible. There's killing of heretics in the church tradition. There's no discussion of that with Matt Walsh, right? Or Ben Shapiro. There is killing of blasphemers in the Hebrew Bible. There is, punishments for apostasy in the Talmud. There's no discussion of that with Ben Shapiro.
I'm just going to pause it right here. So, obviously this guy is just completely throwing out all of Jesus' teachings in the New Testament, which is yes, the Christians follow the Old Testament, and we use it to learn and see how it takes us to Jesus in the New Testament. You understand? You get where we're coming from here? That is what Jesus says, and what we follow is much different than what the Prophet Muhammad says. Okay?
You can talk about, other values, and that's what the discussion focuses on. But the Islamophobic narrative is just lasering in on these specific topics, which is fine. We can discuss that, but I just want to note the double standard. So the other framing of this whole discussion that I want to put out here, though, is that I'm wondering, like this standard of, there should be no punishment for blasphemy, for example. Let's just put that out there. There should be no punishment for mocking and insulting a religion, attacking people's values. Is that coming from a Christian perspective? Is that coming from is that coming from the church tradition? Is that coming from the Bible? Because when we look at the Bible, we see in Leviticus, we see in Deuteronomy that blasphemers should be put to death. Even if you entice, the Bible says, if you entice like your son or your daughter or your wife entices you to worship other than God, then have no mercy. Put them to death without due process mentioned, without any kind of court or tribunal. The husband or the father should just immediately put them to death without mercy. That's what the Bible says. So when Robert wants to criticize Islam, I'm wondering, is that criticism on the basis of the Bible? Is that on the basis of the church tradition? Or is this a liberal, secular, modernist critique of Islam? So I want to know, am I debating or
Again, look, what he's, and this is what a lot of people who don't want to believe in Christianity or looking for excuses will point out to the Old Testament. When the Old Testament is something that we are learning from. Yes, we use it to learn, and there are important lessons in it, but none of it is like condoning. In the New Testament, Jesus changes that, and that is in the Bible, but he won't mention that at all. He won't mention it. Anything in the New Testament, anything about Jesus. And that's the thing. You've got Jesus on one hand and the Prophet Muhammad, right? And you got the Jews that think their Messiah has not yet to come. So this is the kind of stuff you gotta. It's hard to deal with, and you still have to Jesus wants us to love everybody, love your neighbor, right? So we still have to take his opinion and say, okay, you're allowed to believe what you want to believe, but hey, this is why Jesus is important to us. This is what he said, and what did Jesus do? He came with love for the sinners, the diseased, the sick, everything like that. So let's keep going.
Discussing with two Christians or two atheists or two liberal secularists. Like, that's a clarification that we need.
May I?
Yes.
This is a very important clarification, and there are a couple of distinctions that have to be made. One is all of your examples from Christianity are from Old Testament law, which if you had studied Christianity, you would know there's no sect of Christianity, no school of Christian thought, no tradition within Christianity that holds that Old Testament law applies to Christians for all time. As a matter of fact, it never did apply. Even in Judaism, after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, the rabbis redefined Judaism so that even they don't teach that those punishments have ongoing validity. So you're talking...
And that's, again, no hate to the Muslim religion, but that is, what he's saying is correct. And that, jihad and everything like that, it's just not right. That it's not. You should have God gave us the freedom of choice, right? As Christians, we should be going out of our way to teach what Jesus has taught us and what is in our hearts, and what the Holy Spirit and the Holy Trinity just pushes us to pursue. Okay, so
talking about something that nobody in mainstream Judaism or Christianity thinks is valid today versus something that unfortunately all too many Muslims do think is valid today. And the bringing up of ancient historical wrongdoing is all very well, and there's certainly a place for that. I've got no interest in denying any of the misdeeds of Christians throughout history. But the problem that we have in Islam is that these passages of the Quran that are problematic, passages of Muhammad's traditions that are problematic, they are still considered to be in force by very large numbers of Muslims, such that all the major terrorist groups around the world are Islamic groups. And you don't have any Christian terrorist groups saying Jesus is Lord and blowing people up. There's a reason for that. And the reasons have to do with the interpretative traditions in both religions.
Can I comment?
Go ahead,
Please.
Yeah, so I would ask Robert a very simple question that I think gets at what the real issue actually is. Do you believe that it's inherently immoral for an apostate to be put to death?
Do I believe that it's inherently immoral
Yes.
for an apostate
Is it
to be
inherently
put to death?
immoral?
Well, I know this is some kind of trap, but in any case,
No,
I don't
I'm just
see any
looking for
reason.
honesty on your part. That's all.
You can always have honesty on my part. Everything I tell you is the truth.
Okay, so go
and
ahead.
the fact is that, I don't know. I tell you the truth. I
You
haven't
don't know.
thought about
Wow.
it.
Okay,
But-
you haven't thought about it. Well, you're writing
Yeah.
all of these books on Islam talking
how are you
about
criticizing
apostasy,
Islam?
Right.
and you don't even know if this is inherently immoral. That's quite shocking,
No,
Robert.
I would say that I don't think that it's moral to put the apostate to death.
So it's
But
immoral.
as it comes to my books about Islam, I'm just reporting on what Islamic clerics and the Islamic tradition teaches about passages like when Muhammad says, if somebody changes his religion, kill him. So
Yeah, but
if you look, for example, in chapter 4, verse 89 of the Quran, in the critical Quran, where it says, if they turn renegade, then come and kill them wherever you find them, then I give Islamic authorities who actually say that this should be done. And that is something people need to know. Now, whether you're talking about in the ideal society, you have apostates put to death, I don't think so, because I believe in the freedom of conscience and the idea that of the dignity of the human person, which is a Christian concept that's not in Islam. You have in Islam, the unbelievers are the most vile of created beings, according to
Well, one
chapter
issue at a
98, verse
time.
6.
One issue at a
Yeah,
time.
So on. No, this is all.
I still
let's
didn't
talk
get an
about
answer
this
if
issue.
it's
I understand, but this
inherently
is all the
immoral?
same issue. Whereas in
Is it
Christianity,
inherently immoral?
all people are equal in dignity as made in the image of God. And so in that sense, I would say, no, I don't think it is.
So is it inherently immoral, yes or no?
Can I
Yeah.
answer that?
It is.
It is.
So when Deuteronomy, since you like to quote the Quran, when the Bible says this in Deuteronomy 13:6, if your brother, the son of your mother, your son of your daughter, the wife of your bosom, or your friend, who as your own soul secretly entices you, saying, quote, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near to you or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, you shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him or conceal him, but you shall surely kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and after...
what we're missing here, and I sound like a broken, stinking record, man. This guy's not even got out of the first 5 chapters of the Old Testament. And it's like, as Christians, where we draw most of our revelation, no pun intended, is from the New Testament. Yes, the Old Testament teaches us things about God and how God changes with us as we grow over time, and how God wants to enlighten us and take us to a better place when Jesus comes back and rules for 1,000 years where there's no sin. But murder is sin. Murder is sin. It says it in the Bible. And again, that's an Old Testament thing. You can hate on me for it, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we have the 10 Commandments. In there it says, "Thou shalt not kill." But the biggest part we're missing here is, again, what Jesus taught. What Jesus taught. Okay?
Word the hand of all the people, and you shall stone him with stones until he dies, because he sought to entice you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. So all Israel shall hear and fear, and not again do such wickedness as this among you. So
Yes.
when let me finish. Let me
I
comment
get
on
your
the
point.
passage. So when your loving God, Jesus Christ, who you believe is God, who revealed the Old Testament and revealed this as a law for the people, and you said that it's inherently immoral for the punishment of apostasy to be death, then you are charging your own God and supposedly loving Jesus with immorality.
Not
sir.
at all.
If you don't see that contradiction and hypocrisy,
It's not
then
in
we
the
can't
least.
really do much for you.
Well, it's not in the least contradictory or hypocritical, because that is God actually ordering something
Was
directly.
God wrong for that?
Now, the question here is whether the Muslims, when they put people to death for apostasy today, are likewise authorized by God in some direct manner. Now,
That's
obviously,
what matters.
yes, the question is...
And it's not inherently immoral. It just matters what is the correct religion and whether or not
Well, see-
God is actually revealing it.
Yeah, if you study the Old Testament, you will actually find that there's a great deal of discussion about passages like that, and whether they are actually commands by God, whether they were understood by the faithful, interpretations by the faithful. The evolving understanding in the Old Testament and the New, and in Jewish and Christian tradition, is something that unfortunately is absent in Islam, such that in Jewish and Christian tradition you have the understanding of the dignity of the human person that ultimately made people realize that putting people to death for apostasy was not something that was acceptable. But the idea that it was a localized command at some point or understood to be such, that is not the same thing as people nowadays thinking they are the executors of the wrath of Allah because Muhammad says if anybody changes his religion, kill him, and the Quran says that you can soothe your heart by fighting the unbelievers and so on.
So, Robert,
Can we hear from Brother Rashid for one? Brother Rashid, go for it. What's on your mind?
Because this concerns me. Do you believe I should be put to death?
I believe that the punishment for apostasy in a correct Islamic state is death. I believe that that's
So
the correct. Let me finish. Let me just respond,
Yeah.
sir. I believe that that is the correct punishment, which has been revealed by God both in the Quran and the Bible. And for Robert to turn around,
I
and
asked
say,
you-
Let me finish.
I asked you, do you believe I should be killed today?
And I answered you, sir. I answered
Yes
you,
or
sir.
no?
I answered you.
Yes or no?
I answered you.
I think he said yes.
You want me to
yeah,
answer?
I
yeah,
said-
yeah, you answered me.
In a proper Islamic jurisdiction, an Islamic nation, all of the laws of Islam and the Sharia as revealed by God should be applied.
So if we were in that kind of state, would you do it?
Including
I'm not the one that
with
executes
proper due process, with a proper court hearing, just like any nation of laws. The laws of the Sharia should be applied, including the death penalty for not only apostates, but also blasphemers.
You
those who
didn't answer
insult.
me, yes or no?
We did answer
Yes,
you.
we did answer.
Yeah, so I should
did
be
answer.
killed.
We did answer.
I
your question.
deserve to be killed because I left Islam and became a Christian.
According to Islamic law, an apostate like you would be killed. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And according
okay,
to the Bible as well.
let me. This is a fallacy.
blasphemer.
This is a fallacy.
Robert,
too
that's-
cocky. Like you want to say
not a
you have
fallacy.
it too. It's a fallacy.
No.
Let us discuss this because
Why is it a fallacy?
it's a fallacy.
It's
let
showing-
me
it's
let
showing
me
your
finish. Let me
hypocrisy.
finish. Let me finish.
Please condemn Jesus.
Yeah.
Please.
Oh, you think you should?
Condemn Jesus.
Robert already
Robert
condemned
already
Jesus.
condemned him. So
No,
let me-
you're lying.
Let me
Let's be
finish.
on
Let me
record
finish.
saying you're
That's
lying
what
about
just
that.
Let me finish.
That's what happened.
Let-
You said
let's-
eventually
you
we
convert-
realized you
You're
Just
lying.
let me finish. You
Let's hear
converted,
Brother
you,
Rashid, and then I'll come to you. Go for
you
it.
converted from Christianity to Islam. Your life is not under threat here in the U.S. I converted from Islam to Christianity. My life is under death. That's the difference between Christianity and Islam.
Okay, so let me ask you this.
Yes.
I got a question for you guys. I'm a data guy. I'm a finance guy. How many Christians have died going from being Christian to Muslim? How many Muslims have actually been killed or died going from being a Muslim to a Christian?
There's no data on that because these kinds of things are not recorded. They're not considered crime.
There should be,
in
though, right? I
Islam.
mean, shouldn't there even if there's some stories to be able to say,
Yes.
you know, XYZ individual.
I have stories. I have one in Mauritania who was condemned to be executed. We just got him out to Paris because we negotiated with the government there. I have people right now in Libya. They are under death penalty in Libya. I have people who got killed in Jordan, for example, because I do my show. People contact me. I have people who got killed in Jordan. Their parents killed them because they became Christians from a Muslim background. We have people in different places in the world, in the Muslim community, they kill them, and if they get to flee, that's the best outcome.
I got a question. While I'm studying this, there's also Daniel said something very interesting where the guidelines of Quran is based on the jurisdiction of the government, meaning where you live, the religion is follow whatever the laws are of that nation. Meaning, you can correct me. I'm just giving you what I've looked into. Does this mean these rules apply no matter where you live? Is that across the board, or is it's more stricter in certain Muslim nations than other Christian nations?
Islam is to be applied forever on every place since the time of Muhammad until today. So Muslims are just seeking to be a majority one day, and if Muslims are majority today, these two brothers will witness my killing in front of people, and they will be happy cheering the crowds that I was killed. So Islam is to be.
If U.S. became majority Muslim today, you would be killed.
I will be killed. Sharia is to be applied everywhere, every time, and that's the biggest difference with Christianity, because Jesus came and he stopped the Old Testament. He stopped he didn't.
Listen to his words, man. Like, listen to his words. I don't care if you're an atheist, Buddhist, Muslim, Hindu, whatever. It's simple, man. Just search for him. Search for Jesus. He will change your heart, and he will change your life. And all this nonsense and the worrisome about everything in our life and the cloud of judgment that we have and everything that we deal with, whether it's this, that, the other thing, you know what I mean? Like, just listen to it's simple. It's simple.
Stone the lady who committed adultery. He said in the law, tooth for tooth, and he said no, you turn the other cheek. Jesus stopped the Old Testament. They don't have a New Testament in Islam. They have worse than the Old Testament. They have something that Muhammad never corrected. So today we have to do jihad. Today we have to kill the apostate. Today we have to kill the person who doesn't pray, even a Muslim. If he stops praying, he should be killed. If he has no excuse, he should be killed according to Islam.
I'd like to give them a chance to respond. Daniel, what would you, because the point I think you were making was how that maybe doesn't apply based on what the countries are, and then he makes a good point about saying, but if U.S. eventually becomes majority Muslim, then that could be the criteria that we have to follow in U.S. What's your response to that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of inaccuracies in what he's talking about. I want to reframe the issue because he's saying that his life is in danger. But the lives of Muslims are in danger under a secular, liberal hegemony. And I know that some of the viewers might not be following what I'm discussing, but look at the war on terror, or even look at me personally or Jake. But I say things that are contrary to liberalism. I critique and criticize liberal secularism. And what is liberal secularism? It's this this philosophy that came out of the Enlightenment, out of the 18th and 19th century in Europe, and it was imposed on the entire globe by force through colonialism, through imperial wars. And the idea of liberal secularism is that morality should not be based on these old books like the Quran and the Bible. We have to use reason and science to maximize individual happiness, individual freedom, and equality. And this is the best system of life. It's an atheistic system of life. We need to have separation of church and state, etc. This is the dominant, I don't want to say religion, but it's a dominant ideology in the world today. And it's imposed through, the UN Security Council, international rights law, etc. But it's coming from a very specific philosophy that is anti-religion. It's anti-Islam. It's anti-Christianity, anti-traditional Christianity. I criticize this system. And Muslims who criticize this system are put on watch lists. We're banned from traveling. Some of us are drone striked. Some of us are detained. Some of us face all kinds of canceling, deplatforming. Our livelihoods are threatened. I get death threats all the time. Almost every day I'm getting a death threat because of my opposition to this hegemony, liberal secularism. There is no quote unquote freedom of religion, because if you oppose this hegemony, if you oppose this system, you will be put to death. And I know you've had some very...
But what he's talking, the thing that doesn't make sense is what he's talking about is non-Christian people. That's when he says but when he's talking about this, he's not talking about Christians. He's not. So,
distinguished,
at least not true Christians, honestly.
Yes, like Glenn Greenwald, Whitney Webb, and they talk about this system. Alex Jones, they talk about this system. They might not put it in the same exact way that I'm putting it, but it is this authoritarian, centralized, technological system. And yes, plenty of people are getting killed. What was the Iraq War about? What was the Afghanistan War about? How many millions of Muslims were killed because of those invasions? What were those invasions justified on the basis of? It wasn't on the basis of the Bible. I wouldn't put that on Christians. I would put it on spreading freedom, spreading democracy, spreading liberal values and quote unquote women's rights. That's what millions of Muslims in the past 20 years have been killed for, slaughtered, genocided because of this ideology. So yes, Muslims are under threat. Muslims are far more threat than,
I mean, he is speaking truth about the war, and you can say it's justified or it's not justified, but honestly, death is death on either side. You know what I mean? And it's tough, right? Because you don't want to see anybody hurt, anybody dead, no matter what. No matter what. No matter if you were a terrorist, you're killing women for trying to learn to read, or your religion or anything. You hate to see that, man. And I've got family that was part of Desert Storm and all of that, and it's tough. It's tough because we thought we were justified, and who knows? God, at the end, God knows. We tried to do the best we could with what we had. True Christians, I feel like, understand that if we don't have freedom, someone is encroaching on our freedom, then we deserve to be able to defend ourselves. But at the same time, God only knows. God says there's multiple different translations where it says, "Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not kill." Whatever it may be, I'm not making excuses for this, but no, there should be no war. There should be no war. You should be able to believe what you want to believe and not kill or attack or spread terror or anything. So just keep going.
A few Christians here and there that might leave Islam to become Christian.
Go for it.
Well, in the first place, when it comes to secular liberalism, Daniel and I are completely in agreement. We're both against it. We both see that it's evil. And in that sense, you were talking about working together, finding common ground. That is the common ground that we have. The idea of the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan were completely wrong, based on false premises, false assumptions, based on the idea that they could bring democracy to the Islamic world. It was never going to happen. I was warning about it before it started, but was not heeded. But the fact is that, and also when it comes to death threats, we could probably have a contest and see, but I get them many daily, mostly from Muslims, but not always. And the left is increasingly unhinged and out of control. But if Daniel is positing that Islam is somehow the alternative, then I would wonder, how is it that all the Muslim politicians in the United States, including an obvious publicly Sharia adherent one like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib as well, Keith Ellison, the Andre Carson, the publicly Muslim Quran adherent politicians, and yet they're all very far on the left, and they're aiding this secular liberal monster that Daniel so rightly opposes. And so it's hard to see how Islam can be the remedy when you don't even have a...
So yeah, that's super valid. I think they explained that well, and yeah, I appreciate you guys being here. Probably next video is going to be another 3-chapter Genesis. I think we're on, I want to say 22, going on 23, so it'll be 23, 24, 25 in the next Genesis video. We're going to be doing stuff like this, and we're also going to be doing 3 chapters at a time throughout Genesis to Revelation. So I appreciate you all being here, and I love you all. Peace.